That's Nick.
And that's Joseph, and today we're here to talk about the Blu-ray release of Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 Hellbound, which are being re-released on Blu-ray courtesy of Arrow Video. Did I say it's September 24th? September 24th.
Just did.
There we go. Don't forget.
Don't forget. So, part 1 and part 2 work together. Mm-hmm. Part 2 begins where part 1 ended.
Not unlike John Carpenter's Halloween and Halloween 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we can just tell the basic story first.
Okay, sure.
So, these two films revolve around the world of the Cenobites, mm-hmm. which most of us recognize the lead Cenobite as Pinhead. Mm-hmm. But these are these demons that live in hell that seem to be into BDSM and
yeah, that pleasure and pain are all one and the same, kind of. Like
Madonna's erotica album.
Mm-hmm. Or Rihanna's S&M. It's not like either of those things.
Okay. It's really not. So, in the first film, the story revolves around a married couple who move into a home where the wife had been having an affair with her husband's brother, but the brother goes missing. Mm-hmm. So there's a point in the film where the husband cuts his hand pretty badly, blood spills onto the floor, and the remains of the brother are under the floorboards. Mm-hmm. So the blood revives him, and then we find out that he was taken by the Cenobites. And in order for him to be revived, he needs blood. Mm-hmm. So because he had this illicit affair with the wife named Julia, mm-hmm. He was able to seduce her and convince her to get him victims he can feed on.
Mm-hmm. And the D was so good that she goes out and lures men back into the home and beats them with a hammer.
Really was. He digged her down so well that she is willing to. She effectively murders 3 men.
Yeah, and suck on his grisly fingers.
Yeah, but there's more to it. But anyway, so that's that. Mm-hmm. He's resurrected. But
things are complicated by
the stepdaughter, yes. Kirsty.
Yes. Kirsty Cotton.
Her name is Kirsty Cotton.
The Cotton family.
Who discovers what's happening. So the way the Cenobites are summoned is by this Rubik's Cube mm-hmm. device that's called the
Lament configuration.
But
I don't think they say that till the second one.
They don't say it till the second one, but it's basically like a golden Rubik's Cube, and when it's solved correctly, it opens up a portal for these Cenobites to come. So she does it, they come.
A Persian Rubik's Cube.
They want to take her, but she convinces Pinhead that, hey, I know of someone who escaped you, and if you free me, I'll take you to him. So Pinhead is actually very reasonable.
Yeah.
So he's not like Freddy Krueger or, Jason from Friday the 13th. He thinks and he has some sympathy and he agrees. So, well, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Because in the second film, she also tugs at his heartstrings.
Yeah, sure.
She does. Mm-hmm. So she convinces him to let her take the Cenobites to her uncle, who's a total fucking creep. Mm-hmm. They basically destroy him, and then she is able to banish the Cenobites at the end of the first film by doing something with the lament configuration. Mm-hmm. So that's that. Mm-hmm. The second film picks up with her.
And gets a lot more confusing.
Gets very confusing because now in the second film they feel obligated to explain the lore of the Cenobites and the labyrinth they come from, which is like hell. And then there's the
creation of Pinhead.
The creation of Pinhead from their god, which they call Leviathan. Mm-hmm. It's pretty complicated. There's a psychiatrist because we find Kirsty from part 1 and part 2 in a psychiatric hospital.
Again, like Halloween and Halloween 2.
Yeah. And there's a doctor the lead psychiatrist who is...
Dr. Chennard.
Chennard. So she's at the Chennard Institute. He is conducting experiments on patients, more vulnerable patients, because he's aware of the Cenobites and the lament configuration. So he's trying to
conjure them.
Them. He's not quite sure how. So there's that. Julia comes back because
blood is
her, not unlike part one with Frank having his remains under the floorboards, Julia's remains are in a mattress, and the psychiatrist has the mattress in his office. He spills blood on that. Julia,
it's in the house.
It's in the house?
He brings it to the house. Remember, because the other doctor that has the hots for Christy, played by William Hope of Aliens, goes into that house and he gets stuck in there while Chenard...
Oh, that was his house. I thought it was his... Okay, that makes sense. Because I thought his office was really nice.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's his house. So the doctor is able to summon Julia back. And then she convinces him, not unlike Frank did her in the first film, to get her victims. So she's able to come back and be, her old self again. It gets more complicated and confusing and tedious.
There's a girl with Tiffany.
There's a young girl who's also a patient at the psych ward.
Who's good at puzzles.
So she's able to figure out the lament configuration, which transports all of them. The girl, Kirsty, Julia, and the doctor into the labyrinth. And so now the second half of the film is them trying to get out. The doctor ends up becoming like a demon himself. Mm-hmm. And he's actually stronger than the Cenobites we became familiar with in the first film. And this is where Kirsty, again, is able to reason with Pinhead, because we kind of get like an origin background story for Pinhead.
Right.
And Kirsty finds a picture of him when he was human and shows it to him, and he kind of becomes human for a second and agrees that maybe he should help her. Mm-hmm. So they do, and then she's able to get out again.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And then it continues from there.
And then there are 7 more films that I don't think are related, except that they have Pinhead.
Mm-hmm. Who's played by Doug Bradley.
And he's in 6 of them, I believe.
Yeah.
But anyway, so overall...
So the first film is notable because it's based on Clive Barker's novella, The Hellbound Heart, and it was his directorial debut. He only directed 2 more movies after that, Nightbreed and Lord of Illusions. The second film is directed by Tony Randall, who I'm not as familiar with, except for he did a movie called Ticks. I remember watching as a child, which had a very vivid VHS cover and starred Ron Howard's brother. Ashley Laurence as Christy is very like a mix of Winona Ryder and Jennifer Beals to me, and likes to shout her lines, which is entertaining. Clare Higgins as Julia was interesting to me because she's like 32 and they paint her to look
more mature than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a distinct difference between the first and the second. I think the first is much better than the second.
Yeah, the first one's kind of like a metaphor for infidelity. Like, but I think I've mentioned before too, because they're British. This seems very off. They seem off rhythm to what we're used to from things that look like that in that period.
But I like that.
I do too.
I even commented that if they were speaking French, I feel like this would be not on the same level, but a similar vibe to Possession.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
Possession's a better film, but
by far. But
obviously because of the mood and it's more serious. This one's a little sort of over the top, but it's definitely more creative and better acted and written than your typical slasher horror film from that era.
It's got some very creepy moments, like when I think it's the first victim that she brings back.
You're talking about the first film?
In the first Hellraiser, the first victim that Julia brings back and she hits with the hammer, and then you just see that corpse sidling over to him.
Yeah, it's creepy. Yeah. It has a mood, and it's... I think the metaphor is very heavy for infidelity, but it works.
Yeah.
I did kind of like that, in the end, the heroine was able to like reason with the Cenobites.
By selling out somebody else, kind of.
Well, but it kind of gave like hope and that they're reasonable, which, because some of these other films, like, a Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers, they're not reasonable. They're just like killing machines. So I thought that was interesting. I actually do think the first one is like a good horror film.
Yeah.
The second one is doing way too much.
Well, I read that they had a much bigger budget than the studio ended up giving them, and so they kind of had to scramble to do all the things that they wanted to do, and it shows with some of the special effects.
Yeah, the special effects,
which were probably very good for the time, but
and they're cool. I mean, they're
some
cool,
of them
but
are, yeah, some of it looks great.
But it's just like the second half of the film is just like they put everything they had into it.
What the fuck is happening? And why do I care about this bitch Tiffany all of a sudden? And it felt like if David Lynch did the Neverending Story. That's what it felt like.
Okay.
But that sounds a lot better than what this is.
Yeah, it was kind of difficult to finish the second one, just because of how.
Well, there are no parameters. It does create like an origin story, but there are no like real parameters to that universe, the Cenobite universe. So then I don't know how invested am I supposed to be. There was no suspense.
Yeah. It definitely falls off come the second one. But
if you like bizarro fantasy, which nothing like, I appreciate that. It's interesting.
So I don't really have much else to say about these two films. I definitely think the first one is like, for films of that era, I would say like top 10.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of surprising. Like there are parts that elicit responses. It's very bloody, very gory. I can see why David Cronenberg, who originated what we call body horror, would star in Clive Barker's Nightbreed after this.
What would you give the first one?
The first one I'd give 3 out of 5.
I would give it, I almost was going to say 3. I would say 3.5 out of 5.
That's fine.
And then the second one?
The second one, 2 out of 5.
I would give the second one 2 out of 5.
I also wanted to call out the composer Christopher Young, who also did Sinister, because the scores are pretty important to both films.
Okay.
As well. But,
yeah. Is that all?
The disc review, like presentation-wise, from Arrow Video.
Oh, great.
Great. And Arrow's always kind of they hit 4 out of 5s for me.
Yeah, the restoration, I'm assuming they restored it.
Yeah.
Because some of and also watching it on a nice big TV, it was obvious that there was a little extra attention to detail.
Yes.
That kind of maybe didn't help, because you could see more.
You could see more, yeah.
Of the sort of practical effects.
And makeup choices.
And makeup choices. But the packaging is nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.